My name is Henry Guardsman. You probably don't remember me, but you've probably seen me on TV. I'm the guy the Sunday morning news and CNN call when they want analysis and opinion on North Korea's crazy leader. I'm an expert, a talking head. Over the past 20 years, I have worked at the State Department, various foreign policy think tanks, and academia. I'm currently a professor at the Fletcher Kaya School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, located near Boston, and a visiting professor at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. I know this all sounds quite prestigious, and so it is. However, outside of my clique of smartest colleagues, I am about the most ordinary person imaginable. I'm 51 years old, 185 pounds, and there's nothing about me that will attract your attention. No woman has ever looked at me and thought I was hot. No woman has ever fantasized about me in bed. No woman has ever wanted me, except my wife. This is my story. Emily and I have been married for 24 years. She works as a research librarian at the Boston Public Library and is 46 years old, but most people say she looks about 5 years younger. We met when she was a student and I was a graduate student. I was a teaching assistant in her class, and we started dating right after she finished the course. We got married 3 weeks after it ended. She is 118 centimeters tall and weighs about 135 pounds. She was curvy when I first saw her, and she still has all those curves that I love. I was drawn to her intelligence, wry humor, sparkling smile, bright blue eyes, strawberry blonde hair, freckles on her nose and cheeks, and beautiful feminine figure. Oh, and her breasts. You can only dream about her. 38D, and if that's not the first thing you notice about Emily O'Hara, then it's the second and third. As a child, Emily was a little chubby and quite insecure about her appearance. All three of her sisters are tall and built like models, and by that I mean not their type at all. I was Emily's first lover, and she was mine. She grew up in a very conservative family and was taught to protect herself before marriage. She almost succeeded. When Emily and I finally made love, it was the night I asked her to marry me. Unlike Emily, the fact that I had not had sex before her depended not on desire but on opportunity. I never had the opportunity. My life before meeting her was filled with crushes on unattainable beauties, numerous first dates followed by "Henry, let's just be friends" speeches, and hundreds, if not thousands, of nights alone. Girls may like athletes and musicians, and even business masters with prospects for growth, but pimply nerds with a passion for international diplomacy don't have many opportunities for love affairs. Meeting Emily meant passing an exam that the entire O'Hara family took. She is the second of 4 sisters. The eldest, Shannon, a year older than Emily, has some of Emily's physical characteristics. Hair color, freckles, pretty face, but she lacks slimness. I understand why some men find her attractive, but I never liked her. Her personality reminded me of the worst stereotype of a high school cheerleader: shallow, materialistic, extremely condescending to those whom she considered inferior to herself. When I first met the family, she had been married for a year to Brad Smithson, a tall, handsome guy who had been an athlete in high school and college, and was beginning his career at one of the most prestigious investment firms in Boston. Then there was Joni, the third of 4 children. She was pretty, but even less slender. I met her when she was in high school, and we became friends due to her obvious intelligence. I helped her with her college essays. She eventually attended Northwestern University and then received her PhD in biochemistry from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Later, Joni married Will, a researcher who spends most of his time at Woods Hole, an oceanographic center on Cape Cod. Out of all of Emily's family, I was closest to Joni. Denise was the youngest. She was a freshman and looked most like Emily. She was also the wild child of the family. While still at school, she had many boyfriends, several arrests for using illegal substances, and appearing in a public place while intoxicated, as well as a shameful pregnancy for the family. She carried the child to term and gave him up for adoption. In her 30s, Denise married Matt, divorced and remarried, this time to David. They currently live in Keene, New Hampshire. My first meeting with my family was at Thanksgiving. I was raised in foster care, so Thanksgiving was always a bit of a mess. but for the O'Hara clan, it was a big deal. Patrick O'Hara and his wife Sarah made sure that all their children were present in the family home in Tynesboro, a suburb of Boston. It was a wonderful time, and although I received a third degree from Emily's parents and her older sister, I really enjoyed it. As Emily walked me to my car late on Thanksgiving night, she told me that I had passed the test. "I hope it wasn't too difficult. My family can be a little tense," she said. "No, everything was fine. I really had a good time. I think everyone liked me, but you know how bad I am at reading." "Well, not sure about your sister's husband, Brad. He seemed a little dorky to me." "You did great. Drive carefully. I love you. I love you too." 2 years after our wedding, Caitlin was born. She was the spitting image of Emily and the apple of my eye. 30 months later, Sean Patrick arrived. By age 12, he was taller and broader-shouldered than me and played lacrosse in high school. Emily decided to be a stay-at-home mom from the time Caitlin was born until Sean Patrick started kindergarten, and she seemed to love it. This allowed her to find time to be involved in church and community, and she even turned her master's thesis into a book, which sold better than any of mine. I was so proud of her. She worked hard to get back into shape, and at times, self-esteem issues related to body image came back to haunt her. Thanks to hours in the gym and self-discipline in the kitchen, she not only returned to her pre-pregnancy shape, but also began to look even better. For many years, my career required a lot of travel, regularly from Boston to Washington and back, so much so that we have an apartment in the Washington, D.C. area, as well as New York, Palo Alto, and the occasional London, and several times a year in Tokyo and Seoul. Whenever possible, Emily traveled with me, especially on trips abroad. But because of the children and her work, this did not happen very often. Once a month, sometimes more often, she would spend a few days and visit Shannon and Brad at their home in Nashua, New Hampshire. It was only a 90-minute drive from our home in Cambridge. And in the summer, she spent a couple of weeks at a house on the lake Winnipesaukee. Emily talked me and Shannon and Brad into buying it a few years ago. I liked it there, but I rarely went there. I especially liked being there when there were only 4 of us, without Emily's sister and husband. Our marriage was wonderful. We were true partners, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. If someone asked me what the key to our happiness is, I would answer that it is trust and respect. I trusted Emily with my life. She was successful in her career, and we attended many social events together. We promised early on that we would never do anything that would embarrass each other in public, and we never did. Emily could not tolerate alcohol, and therefore decided to never appear in public. I might have a beer or glass of wine at home, but never at a social event. "Henry, in 2 weeks, on Friday, we have to go to dinner at the library fund. I put it on your calendar, so hopefully you can go." "I have seen. Everything will be fine, but you know you're going to have to give me a refresher course in dance if you're going to get me on the floor." "I think it's not bad. I love to dance with you. And you know, I won't dance with anyone else. I hate it when someone else touches me. I also hate it when someone else touches you. And I won't ask anyone else to dance because, well, you know, yes. One day Carolyn asked me in the president's office why you never dance with anyone but me, and I had to come up with an excuse. I couldn't tell her that you tense up on demand and are embarrassed to tell someone about it. Personally, I'm glad that my middle-aged husband doesn't have problems with arousal. Wait, my prim and proper wife is talking about my excitement. And in the middle of the day, too. What will your parents think? For most of our marriage, our sex life was normal. Not great, just okay. Without a doubt, I wanted sex more than my wife, both before and after having children. I was ready every day, but for her once or twice a week was enough. Not that she didn't enjoy it. She said she got it, and she liked the hugs afterwards. But usually she was quite passive. I could count on one hand how many times a year she initiated sex, never wanted to turn on the light, and never did it during the day. Because she often made noise when we made love, she was always afraid that the children would hear. She almost never talked about sex. She didn't tell me what she liked or enjoyed, and she never admitted her fantasies. I told her about mine, and she just brushed it off, as if such things were too gross for her to even think about. I thought it was probably because of her conservative upbringing. And so we come to now. Well, about 6 weeks ago. It was the beginning of October. Caitlin was living in Paris, working on her graduate degree in French literature, and Sean Patrick was attending Cornell as a member of the academic major of the Month Club. I think it's cultural anthropology now. I better start saving more money for retirement because there is no way these kids will have enough income to take care of me in my old age. In general, the children left home. It was Friday evening, and I was especially excited. The crisp, early autumn weather has such an effect on me. Emily and I took a shower together, and I could tell she was in the mood. "That was amazing, honey. I like that we have freedom when the kids are away," Emily said. "It turns me on when I know you're really enjoying it." We hugged for a few moments in the afternoon light, and then she surprised me with pillow talk, like we'd never had before. "Baby, if it weren't morally wrong and I gave you permission, which of my sisters would you want to have sex with?" "Honey, I don't know if you know this, but there is a husband's guide. And one of the chapters in this book is called Questions Men Should Never Answer. The question you just asked is either number 1 or number 2. No man in his right mind would answer it. I think another main question is, honey, if I died before you, who would you marry? Seriously, you always want to talk about fantasies, so I give you permission to talk about them. Which of my sisters have you been fantasizing about? Fine, I will answer. None of them. You don't need to tell me this. Are you saying that if God and I had given you permission to have sex with Shannon, you wouldn't have done it? No, I wouldn't. I just don't find her attractive. She's wearing too much makeup and doesn't have a great figure. The only thing she has are breasts, which miraculously appeared after her 35th birthday, which I'm sure cost Brad a pretty penny. Also, Shannon can be a bitch. Okay, so no Shannon. How about Joni or Denise? No and no. They're just not my type. I consider Joni a friend and she has a great brain, but she is not sexy at all. Denise may be sexy, but just touching her makes me want to take an hour-long shower. No thanks. I am absolutely happy with the sister O'Hara I have. She is all mine. Now, if one of your sisters was Julia Roberts or Scarlett Johansson, then we could talk. You have always been partial to Julia Roberts. Why? It's because of laughter. I love her laugh. Let's see if I can make you laugh as much as she does. Then, for the first time in a long time, we had a second round of play. No more than a few days passed when I overheard a telephone conversation. I was taking the dog out for her night walk, but it started pouring rain, and we ended it early. I walked in through the back door and heard my wife talking on her cell phone in the living room. Yes, Joni, I tried. He's just not interested. No, of course not. I just asked him if he had ever fantasized about sex with any of my sisters. No, that's not exactly what I said. We're talking about St. Henry. He never does anything inappropriate. Look, I have no idea why you want this to happen. He's just not that good, and he's certainly not that great. My Henry wouldn't know if a woman was flirting with him if she threw her naked body in his lap. And he has no idea how to flirt. I don't know how he got me. Yes, 4 would have been better than 3, but it worked so well for so long. What nonsense. Think, Henry, think. What was it? I can decipher the crazy rants of an evil Korean madman, but I have no idea what my own wife is talking about. A few days later, I was walking through Davis Square in Somerville and heard, Henry Guardsman. I turned around and saw Matt Barnes, my sister-in-law Denise's first husband. Bad news, Barnes. How are you? Damn, Henry, I miss you calling me that. Do you have time for a beer? We went into the pub and chatted. Matt, I'm so sorry things didn't work out for you and Denise. It's okay. This really shouldn't have happened. The marriage had long since broken down when you found out about it. I'm sure all you heard was that I cheated on Denise, but she cheated on me from the very beginning. I'm sorry to hear it. I did not know. Anyway, how is the plumbing business going? I hear your advertisements on the radio and see them on TV all the time. Everything is fine. And I got married again. She is great. School teacher in Malden, 2 boys from my first marriage, and we have a girl on the way. Congratulations. We sat and drank our own Samuel Adams, and then Matt looked at me awkwardly. Henry, I have to ask you something. I like you, and I've always thought you were a pretty good guy, and I never felt like you looked down on me like that asshole Brad. Anyway, how do you feel about what Emily does to her sisters? Well, Matt, I know they're close and everything, so they talk all the time, and I just always thought that's how families work. I've never had a family like this, so I didn't know. But, I mean, about sex, how can you think about it? I definitely couldn't. Matt, what are you talking about? Oh, shit. Henry, are you serious? You do not know? Denise told me you knew and you didn't mind. She just asked me not to talk to you because you were afraid that I would think you were a weakling or something. Really? You don't know? And then, within the next half hour, Matt Bad News Barnes ruined my life. There was no doubt that my marriage was over. However, I needed more information to decide what to do. The divorce was certain, but I needed to find out if Emily loved me. One phone call to colleagues at a certain 3-letter government agency gave me the information I needed about the equipment and how to obtain it. I installed listening devices on Emily's cell phone, her purse, and her car. On a Thursday night the week before Thanksgiving, I was sitting in the family room watching an NFL game. After Emily went to bed, I went into the room, opened the app that allowed me to listen to her calls, and heard both sides of the phone conversation between Emily and her sister Shannon. So, Em, you're coming to the lake this weekend to get everything ready? Yes, I'll be there. My wife's voice didn't sound happy or excited, but rather resigned. Did you do everything Brad said? Yes, probably. Listen, Em, this is very important. You must fulfill all his conditions. Okay, dear sister, I always do whatever Brad wants. I only gave Henry sex a few times a month. Why does Brad have to be like this? Because he's an asshole, that's why. And things aren't as bad for you as they are for me. I stayed married to him all these years, with all his cheating and other crazy ideas, mostly because of his great sex, but also to save your marriage. If we don't do what Brad says, he'll tell Henry everything. Do not forget about it. I know, Shannon, I know. What the hell is this? How did we even let this get this far? Emily, you know how. Your curiosity, big breasts, and Brad's insatiable sexual appetite. That's how it is. It is what it is. So here's the schedule. This Friday evening, Joni and Will, Denise and David, and you will come to the lake to play. On Sunday night, everyone else will go home. You'll stay and play with Brad. And when Henry and Mom and Dad and everyone else gets here the day before Thanksgiving, we'll be a typical American family. Okay, good. Come on, Em. You know you like it. It hurts, but yes, I love you. When I'm there, it's really nice. I like that. I feel. But then, when I get home, I realize what I've done. I feel so ashamed. Shame on you. Henry doesn't deserve this. But you should have thought about this years ago. Damn you, Shannon. And I'll be damned. This confirms everything Bad News Barnes told me. My dear wife Emily has been having an affair with Brad, her sister's husband, for many years. And her sister Shannon not only knows about it, but condones it. Joni and her husband Will, as well as Denise and her new husband David, are also involved in this unhealthy game. At least they knew Emily was deceiving me, but I still don't understand some things. It looks like Brad is holding something over Emily. Is it just because of the affair, or is there something else? In my profession, people lie, but not many people know how to do it. I didn't think Emily could do it, but she's definitely better than I thought. She's been lying about our marriage for years. If I tell her directly what I know, I'm unlikely to get any answers. Besides, I have no desire to enter into a face-to-face confrontation until I know everything. On Friday morning, a week before Thanksgiving, I woke up early and made breakfast for Emily and me. Hi, dear. When are you going to the lake? Today I'll go to Boston by car instead of the subway, and I'll leave just after noon to visit Shannon, and then we'll go to the lake together. If the traffic isn't terrible, we'll get there around 7 or so. Well, please drive carefully. I have a meeting in Washington on Monday and Tuesday, so since you won't be here, I'll fly in tomorrow morning. I booked a direct flight from Reagan to Manchester on Wednesday evening. Should I rent a car, or will you pick me up? I'll pick you up. By then, I won't be able to wait to see you. It's really going to be sad. Patrick will be in Ithaca for Thanksgiving, and Caitlin will be in Paris. It's like it's not Thanksgiving at all. I started crying. Emily came over and put her arm around my shoulders. I know, honey. You've loved Thanksgiving since the first time I met you. Family is everything, and he will never be the same. Emily went to work, and I started calling, first a lawyer, then a financial advisor. Then I called a friend who has a friend who knows someone. I wanted to ruin the Thanksgiving celebration at O'Hare, and I would have paid a little more for it. Before noon, sophisticated video equipment was placed throughout the lake house. The next thing was to overcome my biggest fear. Emily was very organized, so I know she kept all the family medical records. I found what I was looking for in her office next to our bedroom. Then I called a friend in Mass, General Hospital, to make sure I know what I'm looking at. It broke my heart, but it was another piece of the puzzle. I had no meetings in Washington, but I drove there in a car that contained surprisingly few items from our home and nearly a quarter-century of marriage. I needed a car there because I was going to fly back to D.C. on Thanksgiving evening. I called a friend in Oxford and another at Stanford. I needed to make sure I had something to do after the Thanksgiving apocalypse. I thought about it, and the symbolism fit. When everything goes wrong, I'll become a zombie. While in Washington, I downloaded footage of the O'Hara sisters' weekend of games at the lake house. I saw sex between every possible combination of men and women. It turned out that my wife had sex with all my brothers-in-law. Not surprisingly, she behaved more adventurously with them than with me, including taking on an assertive role with each of them. With the exception of Brad. She was submissive with him. She accepted everything without comment or even reaction. However, whenever he started calling me names, she would flinch and ask him, albeit submissively, to stop. I was interested, but by this point, I didn't care anymore. The evening before Thanksgiving, I arrived at Manchester Airport, and Emily greeted me. She hugged me and let me know how glad she was to see me. I only had hand luggage, so we went straight to the car. As usual, she let me drive. She took my hand, and I heard her cry. "What's the matter, honey?" "I'm just sad that the kids won't be here, that's all." When we arrived at the lake house, it was late, and the only one who had not yet retired to his room for the night was Emily's father, Patrick. He was 77 years old and still physically strong. He couldn't sleep in bed, so I'm sure he spent the night in the TV room, watching old movies and dozing off. I greeted him, and he shook my hand firmly. Then it dawned on me that this was the last day I would be welcome in his presence, and I was going to make his life even sadder, which made me sad. As we settled into our bedroom, it occurred to me that none of the sexual escapades I had seen on video had been filmed on this bed. I looked up and saw that the camera was on top of the bookshelf, but nothing happened here. Emily kissed me goodnight and rolled over onto her back. This is what she usually did when we were around other family members. Throughout our marriage, she never allowed herself to have sex when we were in the same house as her family. For the first time, I was happy about this and laughed silently at the irony. I got up early and went for a morning walk in the cold and cool of a November morning in New Hampshire. I knew this would be my last walk on the lake. Emily and I Skyped with each of our children and wished them a happy Thanksgiving. She then went to the kitchen to help with the preparations. While I'm equally involved in the cooking in our house, this time the O'Hara women, led by matriarch Sarah, were in charge, with Emily, Shannon, Joni, and Denise helping them out. Thanksgiving passed as usual. The meal was to take place after the first football match. Patrick, Will, David, and that asshole Brad were sitting on the couches in the family room watching the game. I sat in the back, away from the others. Twice, Patrick and David asked me why I was so far away from the TV, inviting me to join them. I simply replied that I was fine. Brad breathed on me, loud enough for everyone to hear, and said, "That's just the way he is." After dinner, I asked Joni's oldest daughter, Heather, to take all of her cousins downstairs to the playroom. I asked her to keep them there until one of the adults told them they could go upstairs. I then invited everyone to join me around the TV in the family room. After inviting Sarah and Patrick to take the places of honor, I began my speech. As you know, I was raised in foster families. You are the only family I've ever had. From my very first Thanksgiving with you, I felt loved and accepted. So I want to share this video presentation with you all. However, in reality, it is intended for our dear parents, Sarah and Patrick. The rest of you have already seen this or something similar in the past. But they didn't see. You'll notice there are boxes of tissues on the table, as I expect there will be tears. I know I cried putting this together. With these words, I pressed the button on the TV remote control and took out my phone. I pressed a few buttons and the phone took over control of the TV. Then I walked to the back of the room so as not to interfere. The show began with a video of Brad having sex with Emily, and then everything went from there, with pictures and videos of all kinds of sexual activities in which everyone present in the room participated, with the exception of Sarah and Patrick's parents, and of course, me. As you can imagine, the screaming started almost immediately. Brad shouted, "What the hell? I'll kill you!" At that moment, he jumped up, I hit him, and calmly said, "Sit down, Brad." Brad didn't sit up. He fell, staggering. After a few more minutes of crying and screaming, especially when Joni and Denise saw scenes of Brad shouting insults at Emily, my future ex-father-in-law looked me in the eye and humbly said, "That's enough, son." I looked at his wife, who was sobbing with her head buried in his shoulder, and, out of respect, I stopped the video. Then I returned to the TV. I want to apologize to you, Patrick and Sarah. I'm sure this was as hard for you to see as it was for me when I first discovered this disgusting activity on the part of your children and their spouses. With the exception of me, of course. It looks like Brad and Emily have been having sex for at least as long as she's been married to me, and possibly longer. And this happened with the consent and even with the assistance of Shannon. I don't know when Joni, Will, Denise, and David joined this sex festival, but I do know that it was the real reason for the end of Denise's marriage to her first husband, Matt. I continued, "The worst part is, as if all this debauchery and infidelity weren't enough, I also discovered that I am not the biological father of our two children, Caitlin and Sean Patrick, which, by the way, they both now know. I informed them via email just before we all sat down for our wonderful family celebration. At this point, Emily went from crying to sobbing. Of course, dear wife, I don't know who their biological father really is. It could be Brad, or it could be anyone else you had sex with while you were making a fool of me. So who is it? Or do you not know?" By this point, I realized that I was starting to speak louder. I didn't want to seem inappropriate, so I took a deep breath and waited for Emily's response. Shannon spoke. "Henry, I'm very sorry, but Brad is the father." "Oh my God, I was hoping it was Brad. This explains why Sean Patrick is so much taller and handsomer than me. Well then, let's get back to good old Brad, my loving brother-in-law. Shannon, ask your husband to sit down and wipe his mouth. I'm drooling from embarrassment. I want him to hear this. Brad, come on, pull yourself together. Brad, I was thinking about suing you for years of child support since I raised your kids. But my lawyer thought that this was not a good idea, since you would be in prison. What the heck? Well, Brad, as you may know, I have friends in Washington, including a small group of nerds like me in the SEC. Brad, you know the SEC, right? I'm not talking about football, Brad. I'm talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission. Apparently, the SEC gang got a little bored recently and decided, based on a tip, to investigate Brad's work. Looks like our guy is a little sloppy. Okay, maybe even very casually. Looks like you'll need a lawyer, old Brad." At that moment, Brad decided to jump up and follow me again. "You, damn it." Well, since Brad is not himself, Let's talk to Will and David. Guys, I thought we were friends, but friends don't have each other's wives behind them. So I guess we were never friends. And gentlemen, I will do something in the name of retribution, but I have not decided yet. You see, I want it to be appropriate, and I haven't had time to think about what it might be yet. Unlike you and your lovely wives, this is all a little unexpected for me. But believe me, I will definitely answer you. They both lowered their eyes. Joni, after what Emily did to me, your betrayal hurts the most. You are the closest person I have ever been to a sister. I thought you really cared about me. I thought you respected and loved me. I'll miss you, but obviously it's over between us. And now to my loving wife. Emily, look at me. She held her face in her hands, shaking with sobs. Now she raised her head, looked into my eyes and whispered, I am so sorry. Dear Emily, that's practically the definition of too little too late, isn't it? Now that our fake marriage is over, tell me, did you ever love me? You've given me minimal sexual contact for a quarter of a century, and it turns out it wasn't because you were cold or conservative or shy. It turns out that you deliberately refused me on the orders of your best lover, Brad. And I understand that. I really do. He gave you everything I couldn't give. A tall, handsome man who mixed with everyone inappropriate things I refused to give you. Glad to know you really wanted this. And isn't it great that your dear sister Shannon agreed to share with you? Well done. I walked over to the TV and took out the large manila envelope I had placed there earlier. So, dear wife, here is the next chapter. This envelope contains divorce papers. Sign them and send them to the lawyer. You see, you are filing for divorce, not me. You file for divorce under the article Irreconcilable Differences. You're going to tell people that you just don't love me anymore and that I can't satisfy you sexually. Yes, this is the same ticket. I think the conditions will seem quite fair to you, more than suitable. You get a house in Cambridge. It's paid for and is worth a lot in today's market if you decide to sell it. Of course, you will also get our share of this place. I certainly don't want anything to do with this little love shack anymore. I'll take an apartment in Washington. Also, in the envelope, you will find further instructions such as how to contact me if necessary. And if you argue with me about anything, the little presentation film you saw today will be a box office hit, watched by Caitlin, Sean Patrick, church people, Boston Public Library executives, and everyone else I can think of. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Perfect time. I'm just on my way to the airport. I'm sorry I ruined your Thanksgiving. You ruined my life. I lied. I told Emily and the others that I sent it to my kids, Caitlin and so to Patrick. A letter detailing their mother's betrayal and infidelity. Of course I didn't do that, but I wanted Emily to think that I was crazy, that I would do something so cruel and, what shall I say, inappropriate. I wanted her to lose the confidence that she knew me and could predict what I would do next, and continue to treat me like crap. On the way from the lake house to the airport, I called the kids. I needed to talk to them before Emily did. Since it was already late at night in Paris, I called Caitlin first. Hello, Father. How are you? Something happened? Yes, dear. I have to tell you something very sad. I know this will hit you hard. Dad, someone died? No, but in a sense, yes. Over the past few weeks, I've learned that your mother was having an affair with your Uncle Brad. And this has been going on for several years now. Oh my God, Dad, this is terrible. My God, how could she do this to us? I don't know, dear, but it's even worse. Today I found out that I am not your biological father, but he is. For both you and your brother, your mother has led to us all these years. This idiot is my father. No, Dad, I won't let this happen. He won't be my father. You are my father. Dad, how could she do this to us? This will not change anything in our relationship. I'm still your dad and always will be. Yes, Dad. Yes. Daddy, are you going to get a divorce? Yes, dear. It's all over with your mom and me. I hate her. I know. From the Lake Winnipesauk's Manchester Airport is 90 minutes away, so I had time to call and so Patrick in Ithaca. The call was just as painful. My son said a few more profanities, but I let him vent. After we finished talking, we started making plans. Dad, I will finish my exams on the 10th. Where should I go for Christmas? I will be in Washington, and you can come there for the holidays or for the whole time. I know that your mother will be waiting for you at home, but it is entirely up to you. Dad, I'm not going home to be with her. I never want to see her again. Buddy, I understand, but I hope that over time this will change. She loves you and will still want to be your mother. Dad, I really don't care what she wants. How can I go from love to hate in one phone call? Buddy, I completely understand you. After the adrenaline-filled confrontation, I was exhausted. I passed out on the plane but didn't sleep during the short flight to Reagan. By the time I picked up my car from the long-term parking lot and got to the condominium, it was already past 11 p.m. I undressed, showered, ate a sandwich, and lay down on the couch to watch highlights of the football games I had missed. I fell asleep in the chair and woke up around 5:30 a.m., my usual time. Over the next few days, I felt more or less numb. I kind of expected to go through the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But there seemed to be no rhyme or reason to my emotions. 1 minute I was angry, then sad, then furious, then just cold. Basically cold. Numbness. Early on, after a conversation with my ex-brother-in-law Matt Bad News Barnes, I decided that I wouldn't hate myself. I wouldn't question whether I was a good enough husband. I know I was. I was a great husband, just not the one Emily wanted. She needed someone who would treat her like a woman of easy virtue because she is a woman of easy virtue. And I refused to have someone like that in my wife, so I would never treat my wife like that. I have always been guided by my brains, and my emotions followed them. It will be so now. I wasn't going to whine and cry like a victim. It was Emily and her sisters who were sick, not me. I'll be okay. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, the package arrived via FedEx. It was carefully packed with extra padding, and strange scenarios about bombs or perhaps anthrax flashed through my head. Crazy, I know. Then I checked the address and the writing. The first thing I saw inside was a note. Henry, after you left, I realized that you don't have a pie. I always bake an extra apple pie just for you. It always meant so much to me that you loved my pie. With love, Mom Sarah. Starting the Sunday after Thanksgiving and every day thereafter, Sarah called me on my cell phone. I didn't pick up the phone, but listened to her messages. Some days they were long, diatribes about how she needed to explain everything and how much she loved me. On other days, a few words with a pleading plea. Henry, please. I never answered calls. Caitlin and I spoke every day on Skype, and we corresponded with Sean Patrick. They both told me that their mother also called them every day. They didn't answer. When they told me this, I didn't answer. Emily will have to try to repair this relationship. Children are already adults, and they have to make a choice. On Monday, I received a message from a friend who learned about the incident from an acquaintance at the SEC. The FBI became involved and arrests were made. My asshole future ex-son-in-law, Brad Smithson, was in big trouble. One of the benefits of being a professor in the 21st century is that students submit their work online. I met with my doctoral students via video conference. I had no reason to return to campus or return to Boston for any other reason until the end of January. On the first Friday in December, I was unloading groceries from my car when my neighbor Ted Evans took a bag and walked into the house. So, Henry, what's going on? You're usually never here for more than a few days at a time, and never on a weekend. What's the matter? Ted is a good guy, a Prince George's County detective. For as long as I've known him, he's divorced, has grown children, and is a connoisseur of good beer. We grilled steaks, yes, real men grill steaks, even in December, and drank some of his good beer. And I told him this story. Oh man, I'm so sorry. I know what it's like. And don't blame yourself for not noticing this. I'm a detective, and I was blindsided. But how could I not notice any of the signs? Henry, it's because you weren't looking for them. This is called confirmation bias. You loved your wife and believed that she loved you. Therefore, everything you saw, you perceived as confirmation of your faith. Would you only see this if you were hit in the head by a large object, as in the conversation with, what was his name? Bad News Barnes? Only after this conversation did you see the rest of the evidence. But, Henry, I have to ask you something. If I were you, I would burn my house to the ground along with my wife. You treated her calmly, or so it seemed to me. Why? I know it is, but not everything has happened yet. But that is not all. When I first realized that she had not just cheated on me, but completely betrayed me, I immediately decided two things. First, I'm not going to stoop to her level. I'm a really good guy. That's right, buddy. Thank you. This is true. And I refuse to stop being a good person. I refuse to let her turn me into something I'm not. Remember, someone said, when they go down, we go up. Now, I know that there are many kneeling Neanderthals who believe that the only way out is to, as they say, burn the bitch. But I refuse to do this because she is the mother of my children, and I knew that the day would come when I would have to face them, and I would feel bad about the way I treated their mother. Just a minute. My knuckles are a good 6 inches off the ground, but I guess I'm a Neanderthal. I tried to destroy my ex. The only thing that stopped me was that I knew that I would lose my job if I did what I wanted to do to her and her lover. And now that you say it, I was worried that I would be perceived as a typical cop, with anger management issues. I refuse to be that guy. But if you think I'm some kind of saint or something, there's something else. Ted, do you go to church? Well, I used to go when I was a child. Not as much lately, although I'm thinking about going back. Ted, I'm a good Catholic, and I remember in the book of Romans, St. Paul says that if you treat your enemy with kindness, burning coals will fall on his head. Henry, Paul quotes from the book of Proverbs when he talks about this. I thought you didn't go to church, but as a child, I went to a Black Baptist church, and in the Black church, every Sunday, the preacher read sermons from the entire Bible, the Old and New Testaments. And I remembered this passage because I thought it was cool to kill your enemies with kindness. Exactly. If I attacked Emily with scorched earth, it would destroy her, and she would hate me. But if the fire came down from above, she would face something worse than hatred, shame. She will spend the rest of her life feeling guilty and ashamed of how she treated a good man. She will sit in our house and feel shame. Every time she talks to our children is a shame. Every photo, every memory is a shame. She will never have an excuse for what she did. You're right. This is even worse. And the best thing is that your hatred for her doesn't consume you because you can let it go. Right. Or at least I hope so. I finally had to return to Boston in mid-January. A new semester at Tufts and Harvard meant I would have to be there at least 3 days a week. The lawyer had not received any documents from Emily, which meant that I would have to contact her soon, using some gentle persuasion. It was 11:45 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, and I was at Harvard. I was just finishing a lecture on the role of appeasement in 20th century diplomacy when I saw 2 men standing at the door to the lecture hall. When I came out, I saw that it was Will and David, my 2 brothers-in-law who were both having sex with my wife. Will spoke first. Henry, can we talk to you? I don't think we have anything to talk about. We really want you to listen to our version of this situation. Well, let's go to class, David said. Could we go into your office to be alone? No. Everything will be fine here, and it will be short, I'm sure. Let me just send this message and then we can talk. They sat in the front row, and I stood leaning against a music stand at the front of the room. Speak up, boys. You have about 3 minutes. They looked at me and each other with confusion, and then Will began. Henry, I respect you very much. I always considered us friends. I think I mentioned at Thanksgiving that friendship is off the table, but go ahead. Henry, we thought you knew what was going on. Our wives told us that you and Emily had an agreement, that you have an open marriage, and that you're okay with Emily having sex with us. Yes, Henry, David interjected. Denise told me that you were simply no longer interested in sex and could not satisfy Emily's needs, so you gave her permission to go somewhere else. And that's when I understood everything. David couldn't control himself. Smirk. And I realized what I was going to do with these two. So why didn't you ask me about this yourself? Will, again, I thought it would be awkward for you if I brought up this topic, that you would think that I see less in you. Now, David, yes, a weakling, and we couldn't do that to you. Therefore, we simply did not raise this topic. So your wives told you that Emily wants you, and poor old Henry doesn't mind because he can't have sex. And you just accepted it? Clear. So you had no problem cuckolding me? Yes, exactly. No, said David. Henry, anyway, we've known for a long time that Emily and Brad were doing this, and Joni told me you were okay with it. So we just thought, Will said, you just decided that you too could take part in this matter. I understand. At that moment, 3 Harvard police officers burst into the room. Dr. Guardsman, everything is fine? Thank you, officers. I appreciate your quick response. Please escort these 2 men off campus. They have violated boundaries. Please find out their names, as I want to make sure they have a case filed against them. If you need to, I will be happy to file a formal harassment complaint. And, officers, am I correct in understanding that such a complaint, if filed, would also go into the database of both the Cambridge and Boston police departments? This is true? Yes, Dr. Guardsman. Well, then I'll come to you after the next class and do some paperwork. As the officers led my former sons-in-law out of the audience, I said, Gentlemen, do not forget about Monty Python. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Over the next few months, I spent at least Tuesday through Thursday evenings in Boston teaching and advising graduate students at the Fletcher School at Tufts and the Kennedy School at Harvard. On Tuesday morning, I arrived on an early flight from Reagan to Boston's Logan Airport before returning to Washington late Thursday. I'll be working at Oxford this summer and moving full-time to Palo Alto in the fall as a professor of international diplomacy at Stanford. Emily and I talked about living in both places, and that was our dream for the future. I saw no reason not to achieve my dream without her. The evening after Will and David's visit, I spent a few hours in my room at the Harvard Square Marriott, where I was staying, and did a little video editing. Late that evening, I sent Emily a letter addressed to Emily O'Hara. One of the terms of the divorce was that she could no longer use the name Guardsman. Emily O'Hara, the lawyer, is still waiting for documents. Sign and please return them within the next 10 days, or the attached video will be sent out friends, colleagues, and relatives. Henry Guardman. A 10-minute video was attached to the letter. The video began with the announcer's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, you think you know Emily Guardsman and now Emily O'Hara, but this is the real Emily. Keep in mind that the video you are about to see depicts events that occurred while she was married to Henry Guardsman. None of these actions were done with his permission or knowledge. The men in this video are the husbands of Emily's sisters. Viewers are advised to exercise caution. The next sound is Emily's cry. I am a woman of easy virtue. The following Tuesday evening, the next one appeared in the cavalcade of stars. Joni, Will's wife, and my closest sister-in-law came to my office. She had been to my office before and knew the way past the security desk. Henry, can I come in? Certainly. Come in and sit down. I'm just about to have some tea. I have a throat cape because I lose my voice due to annual winter vocal cord problems. What would you like? Green, please. Joni sat down on the sofa at the end of the room. I couldn't sit at my desk when she was sitting there, as the conversation would be too awkward due to the distance, so I sat in my chair opposite the couch. Joni and I have found ourselves in the same positions many times. She knew it was my thinking chair. Henry, I'm so sorry. Joni, I'm sure you regret the end result, but I'm not sure you regret what happened to bring us here. But I'm sorry, I really am. I hope you'll let me tell you what I know. Joni, I really don't need to know more than what I know. Emily had sex with Brad behind my back the entire time we were married, and everyone seemed to know about it except me. Moreover, no one thought it was bad. and no one thought it was bad that Emily got pregnant twice with Brad, and you all allowed me to believe that the children were mine. And you were with Brad, as was your little sister Denise, all with Shannon's permission, and Will and David were with Emily. One big, happy, incestuous, and filthy family. Welcome to the O'Hara clan. I think everything is correct, but there are a few details between them that I think you should know. But first, you need to hear what happened after your Thanksgiving presentation. My father was furious. He started shouting at all of us, saying that he was ashamed that we were his children and that you were the only worthy one of us. Emily ran out of the house and was gone until the next morning. We thought she had followed you, but early this morning the police found her at the end of the lake, near Alton Bay. She spent the next day in the hospital. Will and I left right after you, as did Denise and David. I don't know about them, but Will and I had a big fight. He was so embarrassed because I told him that, you know that we all play together. Please don't use that word. Game sounds so innocent, but what you all did was anything but. I know. Anyway, I really want to tell you what happened, sort of a what Joni knew and when she knew it story. I know this won't lead to you counting me out innocent, but I need to tell you this. Please. I didn't say anything, but just sipped my tea. About 5 years ago, Emily and Shannon came to Denise and me. They told us about Em and Brad. It was a strange story, but it was almost impossible to make it up. Brad seems to have had a thing for Emily ever since he and Shannon started dating. One day, when they were not yet married but living together, he told Shannon that he wished she had a body more like Emily's, and Shannon was very upset. She said to Brad, "Well, if you think so, why don't you just go and get her?" This was before you and Emily met. That evening, Emily was planning to come to Shannon's apartment for dinner, but when she got there, Shannon wasn't there. Brad got Emily drunk. You know how Em can't handle alcohol, and seduced her. Shannon returned, and Brad pulled Emily into bed. Brad was Emily's first man. Of course, Shannon was furious. She kicked Brad out. And Emily was ashamed. Emily left, and Shannon didn't hear from Emily for several weeks. Shannon forgave Brad, but Emily still couldn't look her in the eye. Shannon had to beg her to be at the wedding. As soon as you started dating Emily, Brad became very jealous. That first Thanksgiving when you came to the house, Shannon and Brad had a huge fight. Shannon had to take a week-long trip to North Carolina for work and was seriously considering leaving Brad. During this trip, right before you and Em got engaged, Brad contacted Emily and asked her to come over for dinner. She didn't know Shannon had left. Brad seduced her again, and I guess that's when the affair began. Emily was always jealous of the attention Shannon paid to her beauty, while Em considered herself an ugly duckling. And now a handsome man appeared who wanted her. Of course, Shannon knew nothing about this. And what about me? Judging by the chronology, it was at this time that we should have fallen in love. Henry. I know. It does not make sense. It was as if Emily lived two lives. She regularly had sex with Brad, and at the same time confessed her unconditional love for you. And honestly, I don't think she consciously understood all the madness. There is no doubt that she loved you. But at the same time, she behaved in a way that was contrary not only to this, but also to her moral values, including betraying her sister. So you two get married and she stops dating Brad for a few months. But then Brad begs her, and they start dating again. And he starts being very rude to her, including making her do things she hasn't done to you. Brad knew you were both trying to get pregnant, and he deliberately made sure he got her pregnant. Emily gets pregnant and goes crazy. She is sure that you will leave her unless she convinces you that the child is yours. And yet Shannon doesn't know anything? Exactly. She has no idea that her husband and sister are having an affair. But then Brad takes it to the next level. He forces Emily to tell Shannon that she is pregnant and he is her father. Shannon can't have children, and Brad wants to show her that he's man enough to be a father. Brad and Emily tell Shannon, and Brad threatens to leave Shannon and tell you the whole story if Shannon doesn't allow him to continue dating Emily. This is madness. I know, Emily wants to end things with Brad, but he doesn't want to do it. So Emily continues to see Brad once a month because Brad is blackmailing her. And Shannon allows this to continue to save her marriage and yours. Wait a minute. If Shannon knows Brad is such an asshole and treated her for so long, why doesn't she just leave him? And if Emily betrayed her, why should she care about Emily marrying me? Because Brad has something on Shannon that she doesn't want our mom and dad to know. The reason Shannon can't have children is because she got pregnant very early and ended the pregnancy with complications. You saw how my parents reacted years ago when Denise got pregnant, carried the baby to term, and gave it up for adoption. Shannon was sure that if they found out what she had done, terminate the pregnancy, they would disown her. And she told Brad about all this, and he used it against her. There's no bigger asshole than Brad Smithson. Exactly. So Emily and Brad continue to have sex behind your back, and Brad becomes increasingly violent. Emily wants to leave, but she can't risk it, and Shannon can't push her. And then Emily gets pregnant again. And the blows continue. That takes us to about 5 years ago. Brad decides he wants to make the party bigger and tells Shannon and Emily to do whatever they want, but let Denise and I play too. At first, they try to tell us how good Brad is, but we both refuse. Then they tell us about the blackmail Brad is using on Emily, and Denise agrees. I still refuse. And at this point, I'm seriously considering telling you. But Emily came to me with a plea, and I said that I would only do it if we could convince our husbands to open our marriages, and they would participate too. In other words, I will only cheat on Will if it's not cheating, and he's playing with my sisters. That's the only way I would have done it, because I couldn't cope with the guilt. So here we go. We get together twice a year. What you saw was the 9th time. I once overheard Emily on the phone talking about trying to get me into this. What was it? A few months ago, I told them that Will and I were no longer going to participate and that I couldn't handle the guilt of not knowing, if not about the past, then at least about what we were doing now. So Denise and I came up with the idea of inviting you, and we'll all act like we're just getting started. Joni is a very interesting story. Incredible. And I mean that literally. I do not believe in this. However, even in the best scenario, the only possible motivation for Emily's action, I see, is love for Brad's great dignity and blatant disrespect for me. Henry, I understand why you doubt it. And I can't explain Emily's behavior. Honestly, I have no idea what your sex life was like with Emily, but I have to say that Brad was much better than Will. I love Will more than life itself, but he's just not very good in bed. I wouldn't sacrifice my marriage for better sex, but I can understand the attraction to Brad. However, from what I saw on the Thanksgiving Day video, Brad was never as cruel to me as he was to Emily. Joni, I don't think your story of depravity changed anything, but I hope it helped you to tell it, because it certainly didn't help me. I think I need to go to sleep. Henry, I know we probably won't be friends anymore, but please know how sorry I am. For all. One more thing. After everything went wrong on Thanksgiving, Brad told my parents about Shannon. I don't see them staying together. I have to admit, when Joni left my office, I was surprised and amazed that she didn't ask me if I had done anything to hurt her husband. Perhaps it was because she didn't think I was capable of such a thing. The daily calls from Emily continued. Henry, I know you talked to Joni. Please, talk to me. There are other things you need to know. Please, I love you. I am so sorry. 2 days later, my lawyer called me. Emily signed the papers. Brad Smithson had his 15 minutes of fame, as I saw in the Boston Globe and on New Center Channel 5. He didn't go to jail, but he will no longer work in finance, and the fine he paid has dramatically changed his lifestyle. It's a pity for Shannon, because when she filed for divorce, there was little left of him. I waited a few months before letting the other shoe drop. I was already pretty good at video editing. I sent Will and David an edited video of their wives having sex with Brad. But it wasn't about the photographs. These were audio recordings. In them, you could hear Joni and Denise not only agreeing with Brad's words that he was much better than their husbands, but both ladies going much further. They call their husbands wimps, Tiny assholes, selfish in bed, not real men, and, my favorite, pathetic. So much for David's grin. I didn't send the video to anyone else, but the audio ended up going to their work colleagues and friends. It was now July, the divorce had been finalized several months ago, and I had settled in Oxford. I still didn't see or talk to Emily. The calls stopped a few days after the divorce became official. Caitlin called from Boston. Her grandfather Patrick died. She will attend the funeral, as will Sean Patrick. I stayed in England. I sent flowers. He was a good and honorable man, and I thought it was appropriate. All this happened 4 years ago. Today is the funeral of Sarah, Emily's mother. Caitlin and Sean Patrick were there. I live in Palo Alto and did not attend. No, I haven't gotten married again, and I don't date anyone regularly. I don't have the strength for this. No, Mom. Dad won't come. Sean Patrick answered his mother's question. Why can't he just move on and forget about it? Why can't he just forgive me? Why should he keep all his pain? Caitlin replied, Mom, it is. Dad completely accepted this. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't feel anything for you. Then why isn't he here? He probably can't bear to see me. I got married again and he probably can't stand it. Trust us, Mom. He's not here because he just doesn't care. He doesn't even know you're married. What do you mean? Didn't you tell him? No, Mom. We didn't tell him because he doesn't ask about you. Never. He just doesn't care. And when are you two going to find someone, get married, and give me grandchildren? Well, dear mother, this won't happen anytime soon. It seems like we have never seen an example of a good marriage. Yes, Mom. I wouldn't go anywhere near marriage. Never. Not after what you showed us. The children told me about this conversation, and that's how I found out that Emily had remarried. I don't know any details. And it's not necessary. I don't care. Except it looks like the burning coals are still falling down. This all seems appropriate. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.